It was late at night and the army was waiting for the moment to attack. And the moment was right, they saw it. There was a shout, "Attack, kill the demon," and the army ran to attack. He runs right into the army and stumbles. He's clearly not expecting it. He's sweating from the heat of the situation and the number of people he's seen. They are already standing indignant and waiting for him, waiting for revenge. They are very negative. And here he and one meets face to face. Between them there is a strong dislike, and then he hears a shout, "All in attack." The demon starts to defend himself and the soldiers can't do anything and fly away. The soldiers try to resist, but the demon is good at magic and does not let them do anything. The demon conjures a pink veil from his hands and sweat and blood runs down his cheek. He is attacked, but he doesn't give up. He swipes at the ground with his hand and blue streaks float on the ground. The ground cracks and purple flames with a blue cast erupt from the ground. One of the soldiers is frightened by what he sees, because he has never seen anything like this before. Something incomprehensible happens. A pink veil gathers and scatters the soldiers and their spears in different directions. The demon is bleeding from his mouth. He is already tired and out of breath. He is making his last actions. And here he sits down leaning with one hand on a cane and the other on the ground at the same time as if taking all his sorcery. And above him flies three eyes as if watching him. He looks at everything with regret. He clutches the cane in his hand. He gathers his thoughts and pulls himself together, clutching his cane with all his strength, and starts to get up. Something disturbed him as he stood up. He didn't expect to see it now. As he stood up, he heard the question, "Why?" from someone on a white horse. He stands and doesn't look in that direction, but then he hears another question. "Why did you do that?" He continues to stand there silent. The girl asking him more questions. "Why did you make a deal with the devil? Why did you betray us?" He stands there tired and sweaty. She shouts in a commanding tone, "Answer me, Knox von Reinhaffer." He has blood on his face, eyes flying near, looks at her with consternation and says, "Betrayed, eh?" Tilting his head down and grinning continues, "Alas, but no, it's all about you." She stands puzzled and listens to him and he continues, "I didn't betray anyone. It was you who betrayed me." She shouts at him, "Don't talk nonsense, just answer me. When did you decide to do this?" And he just stares at her with crazy eyes. He was disturbed for a second and he said, "It's just the beginning." A blue flash and only a voice is heard. "I'll be back. You have completed the first part of Inner Lunatic. Total score, 27. A young man sits at a table playing computer in a pile of papers and miscellaneous trash, muttering to himself, "Okay, that's pretty good." There is an ashtray on the table with a pile of smoked cigarettes, the young man mutters to himself. "I got quite a few items again." There's a game of missions on the screen, and he keeps praising himself. And he even completed a couple of secret missions. I'm pleased. Looking at the calendar with the date marked, he sadly voices the inevitable. Especially when you consider the fact that I'm going to die next month. 2 years ago, he went to the hospital and had a head scan. Sitting in the doctor's office, he didn't know it was going to be like this. The doctor didn't know what to say and started very anxiously. "Yu-chan, don't panic and listen." He sits in the office and realizes that he's about to be told something very scary and unpleasant. Shock and fear in his eyes. It was daytime outside, nice weather, rays of sunshine glistening on the windows of the houses. Yu-chan came home, sat on the chair holding a piece of paper with a diagnosis. "You've been to the Edegs hospital before, right?" asked Yu-chan. He went to another hospital, but they told him, "We are the second hospital. We've done just as many tests." He sits there scared and sad, hearing only that they can use medication to ease the pain. He prescribed them to Yu-chan and said, "Start taking them when it gets worse." His hands are so weak that he can barely hold a piece of paper. He got worse quickly and started taking the medication. Sitting on a chair, arm hanging down, medication lying on the floor. Sits in the chair and realizes that he has spent 2 years in this condition. Pauses in thought and looks toward the nightstand. There is a calendar on the nightstand and several bags next to it. Just then he was distracted by a violent cough. He covered his mouth with both hands and ducked slightly. There was intense fear on his face from what he saw, a drop of blood on his lips. Looking at his hand, he asked himself the question, "Am I going to die soon?" Sits there wiping his mouth with tissues. He thinks it's better not to think about it, or he'll start to worry. There's a phone on the table and suddenly a message comes in. Yu-chan is wary, slowly picks up the phone. He sees a message from a hospital contact saying that his hospitalization has been approved. He silently and quickly tries to unlock the phone. He opens it and sees several messages that the hospitalization has been approved. He mumbles, annoyed, leans back in his chair and says to himself, "No one will remember me later anyway, and I don't have anyone close to me either." Clutching a bloody napkin in his hands, he says, "So I'm not going anywhere in my current state." Lifting up the phone, he sees incomprehensible flyers. Stops and reads, patient found to have terminal cancer. Next flyer says, let's believe together. And other church flyers. Below, would you like to be hospitalized in our hospital? He abruptly takes all these leaflets in his hand and squeezes them. Throwing the leaflets off the table, he grips the table with both hands and lowers his head. Sits with his head down and tears of hopelessness flowing from his eyes. He raises his head to the computer monitor. His face is all in tears. On the screen of the monitor, the screensaver of the game is burning. Start a new game? Yes, no. And he thinks for the last time he'll go through the game again. He decides to start a new game, and he moves the cursor to the yes button. A box pops up on the screen to choose a nickname for the game. He writes Carl. All in tears and disheveled, he thinks who would he create this time? Music starts playing in the background, and certain skills for the character are displayed on the screen. And so Yoon says, and if you take mana sensitivity and swordsmanship and martial arts, he's confused by his choices and something pops up on the screen. And what popped up was that he got a penalty. Keeps selecting settings, neutral is blank and negative is deadly sick. Sits pondering his character in the game and choosing what he will be. Sits sprawled out in his chair, decides if his time is short, then let the character have it that way. The game asks if he wants to start the game with the current character settings. Barely holding the mouse in his hand, he answers, strange question, leafing on. And then something starts happening to him. He doesn't understand his feelings. His face is shocked and not understanding what is happening. He reclines in his chair, panic on his face with an incomprehensible blue glow in the background. What's going on? Apparently from shock, he leans back too much and the chair does not hold up and starts to fall. As it falls, he manages to see only a table with a computer and nothing else. As he falls, he screams, "No! Am I dying? Is this the end?" And shivering, he covers his face with his hands. A sign pops up on the computer screen. Character creation has begun. Yoon screams, "I imagined death differently at the very least. I thought he would commit suicide." The signature sign pops up again. The character's name has been forcibly changed. Synchronization 4%, 6%, 19%. I see a room with the windows open to the veranda and bright sunlight. Synchronization 71%. There's the sign again that says character created. And then he starts moving his arm without expecting it. He's lying on the bed, covered with a blanket, slowly regaining consciousness. Realizing that he's not at home at all, he sits up sharply in bed. He panics and sweat runs down his cheek. He doesn't understand how he got here. As he slowly slides out of bed, he asks a question. Where am I? He begins to realize that he's seen this somewhere before. Dropping his trembling, sweaty feet to the floor, he cries out, "No!" He staggers across the room and realizes that he was definitely here. Running over to the mirror and looking in it, realization occurs. Suddenly shrieks his... With his hand touching the mirror, he finishes the question. Has he been transported to the game? He screams Nox, realizes he's the main villain in the damn game. He didn't think the character's final phrase applied to this. I'll be back. This is just the beginning. Nox von Reinhafer. He is the Lord of Darkness in the game. His family has strong ties to the Lunatic, the most criminal organization in the world, the youngest son of the 5 Reinhafer children. In his family for generations, all the children have been masters of swords, martial arts, and magic, except he turned out to be defective. To succeed, he made a pact with a devil from a forgotten kingdom. He became the Lord of Darkness and the main villain of Inner Lunatic. Drops of sweat drip down on his face, arms, and neck. Taking one hand on his head with the other on his face, says to himself to think only I became Nox. And then the question follows. Am I sure I'm not dreaming? He stands near a mirror and looks at himself and touches his hair and face. There's some black square with basic information flying overhead. It has a status window, basic information, positive skills, negative skills. In surprise horror, he looks at his stats and doesn't understand why they are weak, and his stamina is 2. Just as incomprehensibly, he asks why there are so many negative skills. He begins to realize that these are the stats he was making his character with. Holding this chart in his hands, he remembers his words. Life was short there, so it will be short here. Standing and remembering that when he created the character, he had only one wish. Standing and in his mind, he wanted the character to be like him. He remembers sitting at the computer and saying that he wanted a character who had nothing to lose. He wouldn't be loved. He would be gravely ill, soon to die. Holding his characteristics in his hand, he naturally didn't know and didn't think that it would turn out this way. Another window appears on which it says there is one unread message. He doesn't realize what the unread message is. He reads the message. It says, "Hello, Yu-chan, or should I call you Nox?" He stands there confused and has a question. Does he know his name? He recalls a picture of a man and a woman with a baby in her arms. Yu-chan. That was the name of the parents he never saw. He's standing with his fist to his lips, and in his head, He's the one who took him there. Reading on, he assumes it's someone from his past, and the message says he probably doesn't remember him, but he has to say something. He's shocked at what he's written. He's been following him for a long time. He doesn't understand how it is. Next, he writes that he's been following him for 2 years, and he keeps coming back to him again and again. So once again, welcome back. He continues to stand and look at the signature welcome back, but only he doesn't realize where with the return and who. Asking someone a question, he is out of his Lee world. It's daytime outside, the weather is warm, and he has a bird's eye view of the high-rise buildings. He stands at the window and wonders if the place where he is now is his reality. He starts to get angry and clenches his palms into a fist because it's all nonsense to him. He looks up and sees the following message, which says that whoever moved him can't tell him much about himself. Someone wants to help him, but he doesn't see how he can. He tells him to go to Eldane Academy. Standing there are many young guys and girls in beautiful black uniforms with white shirts and blue ties. He starts telling Yu to train and gain experience there and to try to follow the original story as closely as possible. He tells him that the truth will reveal itself. Yu is horrified and yells at him to stop, and that's that. Standing with his back to the balcony, he rubs his head from the information and decides he needs to get his thoughts together. Looking at himself in the mirror, he decides to put everything in his head in order and says, first of all, he has been reborn as the main antagonist of the game, Inner Lunatic. He remembers saying that he can't deviate too much from the original story. But it doesn't matter to him because the way he interprets it, the outcome is ultimately the same. Death. He again receives a letter with a greeting in his name. Then immediately the author changes his mind and decides to call him Knock. Yu begins to accept that Inner Lunatic has become his reality. He keeps looking at the message and saying that it doesn't mean he can give up his lost memories. The book opens and a tree grows out of it with a glowing beam, and Yu's voice is heard in the background. He doesn't care at what cost he will stick to the main story, to recover his memory to survive. He stands angrily with his palm clenched into a fist. He is sure that he is willing to become a real villain for such a goal. Standing there is a man with a nonchalant face, wearing a black suit, holding a rod. There's almost no difference between his old life and this one. Smirking slightly, he thinks about it. He begins to remember that moment 2 years ago, when he had not lost his memory and sat in the doctor's office for the first time. He was terminally ill then, and every minute of it brought his death closer. He lived his life in fear of waiting for the end. Standing in a large room with a luxurious interior, he realizes that nothing has changed except the settings, in a world he knows like the back of his hand. Knox asks the system for a number, and it gives him February 4th, 1812. He's a year away from entering the academy. He realizes he's running out of time and smiles slightly. He has accepted the whole situation and is now smiling because he likes it. He decides to begin his 28th attempt at a perfect pass. He heads for the door with a good mood and a great attitude. As his hand grasps the door handle and pulls on it, he feels pain. He doesn't realize what happened. Here the system reminds him that his negative trait has been activated, and he has developed an inflamed wrist due to illness. It recommends rest and treatment. He leaves the room, walking down the long hallway quietly and looking around. He walks musing to himself and not looking ahead. He is very curious about his body and the fact that he's very weak. Suddenly, a young girl who looks like a maid crashes into him. Plates fall from her hands to the floor and shatter into various pieces. She falls to the floor and cries out and holds her head. She is flushed from what happened. Knox cries out in pain. The servant who fell. Mr. Knox cries out in horror. The servants nearby stand in horror. He squints to tears at the pain in his arm, shouting loudly that he is in a lot of pain. After he calms down, he looks at her closely and realizes that her face is familiar to him. That brown hair and light orange eyes. He remembers it's Rona. She falls to her knees in front of him and sobbing apologizes to him for hurting him. He just stares at her. He remembers that she's a minor character and that she was spreading rumors about Knox. She looks at him with pitying eyes as if begging for forgiveness. He can't believe this angel is on Knox. He leans over to her and smiles sweetly, saying that he forgives her this time, but if he looks at her with tenderness and kindness, and after a pause, he says that if it happens again, she, with tears on her face, exclaims joyfully, "Good, of course." He looks at the others with incomprehension as to why it is so quiet. The servants look at him with a look of horror on their faces, as if waiting for something. The girl who has just fallen is looking at him with the same horror as the others. He looked at them and realized that he was playing it a little wrong, while thinking to himself what kind of life Knox was living. The girl who fell with care and caution asks where he is going so early in the day. He stands and says he's going to the gym. Everyone looks at him in surprise and asks him where he went. He stands laughing and an idea pops into his head. He suggests Rona to go with him. Rona shouts very excitedly and agrees. He heads into the hall and she quietly tells her friends not to say that he wants to beat her up. They walk down a long, beautiful hallway. She walks timidly in front and he walks calmly and confidently behind. She stops, not realizing what is happening, and he walks calmly forward. He is walking and he has only one thing in his mind. The main thing is to survive. He remembers how he fell with the chair to the floor and remembers that feeling of death. He lies on the floor with sadness in his eyes and tears rolling slowly from his eyes. He doesn't want to die anymore. Walking through the courtyard of the house, he realizes to survive, he needs to get used to his new surroundings and as quickly as possible. Stopping, he brings his hand to his chin and mumbles that he has a chance. Rona stops not far from him, but she doesn't know what he's talking about. He remembers some map. He realizes that having gone through the game 27 times, he knows all its pitfalls. He asks for a status window to appear. The window appears out of nowhere and he looks through it. Inner Lunatic is a game about angels and demons fighting in an empire, which has gathered a lot of fans around the world. The peculiarity of this game is that there is a huge range of customization, allowing players to choose different traits. If you have characteristics like ordinary and talented, you can choose as many as you want. But unique skills can only be used once. He and Rania stand in front of the stairs, and he reasoned that it would be easy for him with unique skills to get to the top. He stands looking seriously in front of him. After all, he even has 2 unique skills. In this game, there is a concept of penalty characteristics. When the chosen skill exceeds your limits, such as mana sensitivity, and the game offers another skill. But due to the advantage of the system that analyzes you and picks the right skill, you can choose 2 unique ones. Sword and martial arts proficiency endows the wearer with the ability to wield a sword, allowing you to reach the apogee of swordsmanship. There's also mana sensitivity, which increases one's sensitivity to magic, allowing one to cast spells more effectively. Standing with an intent face, he realizes that he has a lot of useful skills. For example, the Vision Hero privilege, which opens status windows of other characters to the wearer. Or for example, acting, which he could use. It allows you to behave naturally in any situation. And a cool mind in battle helps to keep calm and a clear view of the situation. But all of this also comes with negative traits. Like being terminally ill, for example, is the worst possible thing. He looks out the window of condition opened on the negative traits. This is where he starts to get really scared and smiles strangely, realizing that he is just one disease that the hospital is crying for. Players with anemia can't step on cold surfaces without warming spells. And those with weak immune systems can faint at least once per chapter. Holding his head and laughing, he realizes he doesn't stand a chance. Looking at the large house in front of him, he decides that he will deal with problems as they come. Rona sees that they have reached the training room, but doesn't believe he is really going there, looking at him very questioningly. She realizes that's where he's really going. He stands there looking at that building, as if he's gathering his thoughts. He goes into the building and she continues to stare, not knowing what to do, to follow him or not. He swings the doors open and goes inside thinking what he needs. And he needs to get rid of the curse of weakness first. Because with this curse, the player is cursed to be weak from birth, which halves the speed of development, and the resistance to enemies is also halved. He raised the wooden sword upwards. It was hard for him. Holding the wooden sword above his head, he said that no matter how much you think, the conclusion is the same. Lowering the sword in front of him, he realizes that it is getting very hard for him. Holding the sword with his last strength, all sweaty and with horror in his eyes, he realizes that he is fucked. The sword spins and falls to the stone floor. Nox falls beside the sword without strength, and he has come to only one thing. There are tears of sweat on his face and saliva runs from his mouth. He couldn't swing the sword longer than 10 times, and the curse of weakness only makes it worse. Stone walls and columns, windows small, and a flag on one wall. That's what he sees now. Slightly raised from the floor, he looked at the room. It's good that the choice of weapons is large. Only thing is, the Reinhafer family lineage is all about swords. When it comes to the Reinhafer family, there are many words to describe them. But the best of them all, House of the Blade of Darkness. They earned that nickname for a reason. It's all because of their sword skills and their use of black magic to crush their enemies. The commander's blade is to blame. Also known as the Ruthless Blade of Darkness, the head of the family passes it on to his successor, the future head. The tradition of passing the blade continues to this day. He doesn't realize what use it is. In addition to skillful swordsmanship, a noble family provides many benefits, the most important being money. Sitting on the floor and looking around, that indeed money is the most important thing. He joyfully clenches his palm into a fist and raises it up because money is excellent. The Reinhofer family is one of the most noble of noble families. Of course, they are very rich. sits reasoning that even their useless youngest son will never have to work for a living. And most importantly, Knox's father, Theo, doesn't care where Knox spends his money or why. And Knox is not the type of character. He's the youngest son of a noble family. He can barely stand up, and he thinks the essence of his personality is crystal clear, and he's going to make the most of it. Standing on trembling knees, he realizes that Rona is willing to do his bidding for now. Rona stands next to him and asks him not to ask her to do something weird. He laughs at the fact that he can't even run. A few minutes earlier, Rona brings something to Knox, and he walks over to her. On the tray are hot water in a bowl, a towel, and a decanter and mug. Rona lowers her head and says that she has prepared everything he asked for, which is a wooden sword, a towel, and water. She looks at him and still can't believe he was going to train. He asks her if anyone is around and asks her to come to him. She immediately starts sobbing and tries to defend herself and yell out what he wants to do or hit. He gets a little angry and doesn't know what she's talking about. Taking her quietly by her ear and whispering to her, she listens intently. He leans into her ear and tells her what she needs to do. She agrees, but at the same time, asks him what he wants to spend a lot of money on. She tells him that what he just said is complete nonsense. He smilingly tells her to shut up and do. She starts crying and asks him not to be mad at her. She quickly ran off muttering to herself that he hasn't changed a bit. He remembered that Rona had brought him water. He looked at the sword lying on the floor and mouthed that he didn't know how fast she'd be done, but maybe by tomorrow. Walking over to the tray with the teapot and mug, he grabbed the teapot that Rona had brought. Closing his eyes, he starts drinking the tea, and thinking that he needed to get rid of the curse and boost his stamina. He didn't expect it to be this bad. While he was drinking tea, someone approached him from behind. He became alarmed and stopped drinking. A man's voice was heard behind him, greeting him. Turning around and seeing who it was, indignantly shouts to him. The head butler, Rudwell D. Earnark. He's one of the main managers of the Rheinhafer estate, and he's clearly not someone who can be dealt with easily, as he wanted to be. He's an advisor to Knox's father as well as the head of the Rheinhafer family, Theo von Rheinhafer. That's what he was. With a shaky, weak hand, he puts down his mug and realizes that he's going to have to sweat with him. He looks at the butler seriously and warily, not yet knowing what he wants. He should either not care, or he has noticed that something suspicious is going on. Placing the mug on the tray, he thinks he can resolve this situation now. He calmly asks the butler what he's doing here. After all, he is supposed to be serving the head of the family. Acting skill activated. The butler bowed his head and said that he received orders from the head here to share. Knox is shocked to hear this. The butler tells him that he has been told to have Knox come to dinner. Knox shakes uncomprehendingly and asks him if the butler is joking. Knox wonders if he wants to have dinner with him and asks him to tell him he can't tonight. Knox doesn't understand why the head of the family would invite a young gentleman to dinner. The butler continues, saying that the lady of the Stilliner family has paid a visit and it seems that she wants night training. The butler begins, if the gentleman will not join the dinner. The butler says that the gentleman will be out of his mind. Knox looks at him very angry and serious. Knox sighs heavily and replies that he understands him. The butler looks at Knox questioningly as if he's waiting for something. The butler asks if he has anything to say since he is not himself today. The butler tells Knox that he wasn't attracted to swords before, but today he decided to come to the training room. The butler asks if he can ask why he is here. Knox calmly replies to him, "Let me get something straight." Knox says, although he is the head butler, he should not cross his young master. Knox calmly and confidently says that what he does or what his intentions are should not concern him, and it is up to him to decide what he will do. The butler looks at him anxiously, sweat beading on his temple. So Knox turns around and walks out of the training room. The butler stands still and stares at him, not understanding what is happening to Knox. As he approached the door, Knox had the thought that the butler had noticed something. The butler decided to report everything to the head of the family. The weather outside was warm, the sun was shining brightly, and the castle looked large and majestic. Knox nervously and quickly closed the door behind him, drops of sweat beading on his hands. Knox is sweaty standing at the newly closed door. He didn't expect this to happen. He wondered what would happen if his obsession was activated. He feels like he's following him, trying to forget. He looks away anxiously, not understanding what is happening, says the young mistress of the Stilliner family. The young red-haired girl turns to him, wonders what she is doing there. Night has fallen, it seems clear outside, but clouds are present. Knox arrives for dinner and hears in his direction, "Hey, look, the idiot's here? I guess I'm not going to enjoy my meal tonight." Knox calmly sits down at the table and lowers his eyes. The twins Hartiz and Alan chuckle and tell him not to say that he still regrets being in this family. The twins say they didn't think he would come. Knox looks at the twins and they openly laugh at him, bringing up the fact that he was looking at the maid and telling him he's hopeless. Knox rudely says that he has done nothing. The door to the refectory opens and a voice comes from there. The maids bow. Someone says everyone is in. Knox lifts his head, looking up with guilty eyes. Walking past Knox, Ton von Reihofer looks at him very menacingly. Knox looks at the mistress and a voice is heard in the background, all in place. The head of the Reinhofer family, Knox's father, and a red-haired girl with a pleasant voice says hello. A young beautiful girl looks at everyone with a smile and introduces herself. Her name is Talia von Stilliner, and she is happy to see everyone. Ton tells her that the young mistress has come to take night training, and she will be staying at their estate for the time being. The brothers look at her without taking their eyes off her. Ton escorts Talia to the table with the words, "Make yourself at home. You are welcome here." Knox stands up from his chair. Talia, inner lunatic heroine and character confronting future villain Knox. Knox looks sadly at Talia. She is the one who will be driving a sword into Knox's chest very soon. It is already night and the palace lights are on. Tone mumbles that Knox has decided to join in as well. Knox looks away from Talia in embarrassment yet sadness. Talia looks at him incomprehensively as if she wants to ask him something. Tone said, "Since everyone is gathered, let's start the meal." On the table, there's a piece with vegetables and a plate and a knife and fork next to it. Someone has already started dessert, dipping a golden spoon into the dessert. The brothers grin at each other and at Knox, and he doesn't know what's going on. One of the brothers tells his father to make a decision. Knox slowly asked which one of them would go to Eldane Academy. Ton thoughtfully answered his twin's question. "Yes, you're right. Eldane Academy is the most important location in all of Inner Lunatic. The students of the academy face various dangers with demons. That's what the story of Inner Lunatic is based on." Knox thinks about the fact that he needs to get into the academy. Remembering what he was told by the one who moved him, he realizes that he only needs to follow the story, but also gain allies. Tone said that everyone knows that the Eldane Academy only accepts 3 candidates from a family. That's how they control the nobility's influence. 2 candidates from his family have already been accepted, his first and second son. Now only one of them can go to the academy from the Reichower family, Ton says. In the background of the academy, Thon's sons and a third unelected member of the Reichower family. Knox figured before he got allies, he'd lay down his bones, but he'd be the one to get into the academy. They sit at the table and look at Ton intently. Ton has decided to follow his family's traditions. Suddenly, Knox starts. It turns out that he's going to make a fight between them. Ton looks at Knox questioningly, as he didn't expect Knox to react first. Ton said that in a month they will choose a family representative through a duel to be held in the training room. The twins tauntingly tell Knox, "Brother, here's some advice. Don't get cocky, don't embarrass yourself. An idiotic weakling who's never even held a sword in his hand has no chance of standing up to them." Talia looks at Knox carefully and he answers them seriously. This pauses for a moment and continues, "You're going to be talking after we win, assholes," and calmly takes a sip of wine. One of the brothers says indignantly that he seriously thinks someone like him can beat them. Knox sets his glass down on the table, thinking that this duel is just one more test to pass to get into the academy. Knox looks at the glass with disappointment, and in the background he can hear his brothers saying they're not going to listen to his nonsense. Knox began, and took a pause. Then continued by saying that he would be the one to get into the academy. Tone looks at Knox with suspicion and disappointment. The brothers look at Knox very angrily. Talia looks at all of this with a smile, it seems to her, and she takes a pause. She looks at Knox with a smile and says confidently that he is confident in his abilities. Knox looks at her calmly and sadly, but he has a sea of emotions raging inside him, shocked at her words. And she sits back and laughs quietly. It is deep night outside, and Knox is thinking that he has attracted Talia's attention for nothing. It is night, and there is still a light on in one of the rooms. On the desk is a stack of some papers. In the study, the head butler and Ton are talking. Tone agrees that something has changed in Knox. The head butler bows and says it is noticeable. Ton thought with his hand to his chin, because if he hadn't witnessed what happened today, he wouldn't have believed the butler's words. Ton didn't understand why Knox had changed so suddenly. He wondered if he was possessed by a demon, continuing to run through his head that Knox had gotten his attention. He replies to the butler that he understands. Tone asks the butler to continue following Knox. It is morning, the sun has not yet fully risen. The remnants of dawn are present. Knox has gotten up early and is already running to the training room. The maids are whispering among themselves. After all, the young master is in the training room again. One tells the other that the duel will take place in a month. Another says it's true. A third asks, but why? Knox runs talking to himself. Why is all he does is run? Knox turns around to see the maids talking. He has a question as to why he hears every word they say. He doesn't remember having unique hearing skills. Knox runs and is out of breath already. A status window pops up. His stamina level went up 0.1. Nox is outraged at how much his level went up by. As he continues to run, Nox again asks himself why he is running, because his main problem is his stamina. The prerequisite for using swordsmanship and martial arts is a stamina level of at least 4. Nox has tears in his eyes and realizes that he could have easily used his skills if he wasn't Nox the weakling. He remembered what skills he had chosen. Nox stopped. The curse of weakness was going nowhere from him. Nox bent over slightly and muttered that he had managed to raise his stamina level to 1.9 in a month. The curse of weakness. It is a curse that halves all progress. A man in a cloak with a stick. He is surrounded by chains with locks. Nox looks at the level and realizes that even after a strong workout, his stamina level has increased by 0.1. The side effects of the deadly disease are adding fuel to his fire. Unlike the others, he's going to have to work harder. Why it's so bad? Thanks to the deadly disease because of it, his stamina level is 15. His ceiling will think about what to do about it. The maid brings a tray. The maid calls Nox. She's brought him everything he asked for. He's surprised because she's done it faster than he expected. Now he's going to get things done. He looks at the tray as he reaches level 4 stamina. On the tray is the poison of the 3-headed gorgon, the tears of the fairy of memories, the heart of a golem, and a scroll of fast stamina growth. Picking up the bottle in his hand, he realizes that everything has already been thought out. It's simple. You just need to use the knowledge to solve the problem. An empty courtyard. The sun is shining brightly. There's no one in the yard. Nox is in a training room with a bunch of swords and more. The maid sadly asks Nox why he needs all this stuff. You have to be careful with poison and other things people try to avoid. And they cost a lot of money. Wouldn't one scroll be enough? Nox replies that they don't know how to use the ingredients properly. The maid asks in surprise how to use properly. Nox turns to the maid with the tray. Nox slowly reaches out for the blue bottle. He quickly drinks the contents of the bottle. The maid screams in horror that it contains poison. Nox turns pale and covered in drops of sweat. He replies to the maid that it is deadly. He feels himself getting very sick. A status window pops up. He has taken the poison. His health level increases by 1.5 times. He is 959 to his death. Nox grabs onto the tray and leans on it. Nox reaches his hand again for something lying on the tray. The maid yells that she will get the head butler. Nox orders her to stand still. He takes a bite of what he has taken from the tray and says softly, "This is what it tastes like." The maid shouts to Nox that the heart is inedible. A window pops up saying that he has consumed the golem's heart. Gradually, it will start to petrify. The next window pops up. The secret recipe has been activated. The poison of the 3-headed gorgon interacts with the golem's heart. Nox calmly watches with a smile. Everything works perfectly. He spells it out, that's all. Normally, the golem heart is used to turn people into fossils, or to quickly boost health, or to create artificial golems. But when the poison of the 3-headed gorgon comes into play, the secret recipe is activated, and the poison of the 3-headed gorgon interacts with the golem's heart. The curse of weakness disappears. Nox is happy. He raises his hand and happily shouts victory. The curse of weakness is lifted. The maid is horrified. She thinks the young master is about to die. Nox has one last step left. The maid asks if he's okay. The maid closes her eyes. She doesn't understand what he's doing or why. Nox starts to unbutton his shirt. She calls out questioningly, "Young master." Nox calmly looks at the maid and unbuttons his shirt. The maid continues to yell at him. The maid looks at what he is doing and not realizing, he reaches for the next ingredient. He starts pouring the contents of the vial on himself. A window pops up. Tears of fairy memories. The fairy tears run down Nox's face. The petrification process due to the golem's heart has stopped. The tears interact with the golem's heart. He has a strange sensation. He activated the secret recipe. He gets the skill gift of progression. Everything goes as he planned. The skill is positive. He activated the gift of progression, and until the stamina reaches level 5, the stats will double. The final step, he picks up the scroll. He happily tears the scroll, his hair mussed and a smile on his face. He has used the stamina scroll and his stamina growth will be doubled. He thinks about it. He has broken the curse. Since the blessing of progression limits the debuffs from the incurable disease, he has already used the scroll. He is very happy. His current rate of progress should be several times that of normal people. So now his stamina should increase faster. The maid threw herself into Nox's arms. He felt a little hurt. He pushes her away slightly. She asks if he's okay. He's holding his side. She thought he'd lost his mind as he started to undress. He calls her names and asks her to get a towel. She stands and looks at him, surprised with tears in her eyes. She holds his sleeve, and he smiles slightly at her, thinking that now that the curse has been lifted, he should go easy on her. He laughingly says, "Naturally fine." She asks if he's sure he doesn't need to call the head butler and if he wants to rest. He turns around and says it's fine. She stands and quietly listens to him. She asks what he's going to do now. He replies with a smile on his face that he will go for a run. The weather outside is perfect. The sun is shining brightly. He runs out into the courtyard, a little surprised to gather his wits. He starts to run and the maid runs after him. Someone is watching from afar as Knox runs and the maid follows him. The girl puts her elbow on the rock. She is surprised at how he does it. She looks at him seriously, leaning on his arm. She doesn't understand why someone so weak would take part in a fight against his brothers. Talia's maid Emma stands nearby and says that it is unseemly to burn the youngest son of the Reinhofer family with her gaze. The maid repeats again that it is bad manners, but Talia continues, no really. Talia points at him and tells Emma that he is not wielding a sword, only running in circles. The Reinhofer knights volunteered to help him with his training, but he dared to refuse. She indignantly says that in a month he'll be blown to smithereens and that's the end of it. She broods and gets upset. She's sure that's what's going to happen. She looks at the gate, asking herself why she cares, telling herself enough is enough. The maid looks questioningly at Talia and asks, "My lady?" Talia says she will be back soon and heads off somewhere. Talia went to the courtyard where Knox is now running around. She walked out into the courtyard and stood up. Only her shadow could be seen. Talia stood in front of Knox as he sits where a maid lies not far away, yelling, "Wait." Talia stood in front of him and introduced herself, that her name was Talia. Knox looks surprised and doesn't understand why she came here. He stands up and asks what she wants and reminds her that she already introduced herself. She stares at him in bewilderment, wondering why he has this attitude and why he's being so cold. She is sure he is smitten with her beauty, but he continues to stare at her incomprehensibly. She is too convinced that he has fallen in love with her. She wants to ask him something, and then she asks him, is he sure he will beat the brothers, so he agreed to participate. Knox, standing quietly and listening to Talia, she asks two questions. Is it true that running will help him, and does he believe there is even a small chance? The servant girl huffs and listens to Talia and agrees with her. Talia proudly and happily offers her help to Knox, but he turns around and walks away, muttering that he refuses and rudely asks to leave. She only manages to ask that. Talia is very angered by this behavior of Knox. She continues that she kindly offered to help and he refused. The maid is horrified and yells that girls don't like to be spoken to like that. Talia yells for him to forget and quickly starts walking. Talia hits him with her shoulder as he walks by, telling him to do what she wants. He just replies, "Ouch." Knox stands with the maid and doesn't understand what happened. She asks him if he really doesn't understand. He watches Talia walk away and says things are only going to get more complicated now. He watches her stats and realizes she's very talented and inner lunatic. Watches her stats, realizing that she's very strong. Only very strong men have level 4 stamina. She has very strong stamina stats. But compared to the 3 great sword masters of the continent, or even one of the 4 great mages. But we have to be honest, she has a good chance of rising to their level. Thinking further continues, with her fire element, she can already kill a couple 3 demons. Putting a strong emphasis on her fire element. The fire element magic Talia uses can awaken white flames, which will be used to kill a demon-possessed Knox in the future. He has an idea to turn Talia into his ally, but then history would change too much. He realizes that he needs to find a way to follow the story as accurately as possible, but avoid death to begin with as well. He wonders if it's possible to be on good terms with someone who will then kill. A month later, the bright sun shines into the room. Talia walks calmly down the hallway holding her sword. She looks sadly somewhere, as if she has remembered something. Everyone is surprised at her in training because she understands everything very quickly. Someone says with a smile, which is expected from the pride of the Stilliner family. It echoes in her ears, the pride of the Stilliner family. She looks up as if she's seen someone she didn't expect. Dropping to the floor next to the broken sword, she asks, "Sister?" Standing up, she doesn't look forward but tilted her head down slightly as if she was ashamed. She took the hilt of the sword in her hand, preparing to defend herself. She sadly wonders if she can become a knight. A knight should never succumb to greed, remaining always humble. He must sacrifice himself to serve the greater good. To become worthy, he must master the art of sword and form. She wondered how he would defeat brothers who had trained for years. It's dark, but Talia thinks it's impossible for Knox to defeat his brothers. The next day, it's bright and warm in the yard. The sun is warming with its rays. The sun's rays hit the room and shine brightly. Knox and his twin brother stand across from each other, prepared. Watching from the balcony above are Talia, the head butler, Tan, and some woman. Some woman, it's Theo's first wife, Cecilia. Theo calls out to Rodville. He turns his head to the side. Theo asks what will be the outcome of the duel in his opinion. He hesitates, not knowing what to answer him. Someone shouts loudly, asking for attention from those present in the room. The official duel is announced, which will determine who is worthy to enter the Eldane Academy. Nox looks at his opponent with an attitude as it is about to begin. The twin leaps to attack, and Nox tries to defend himself. The training room is bright, with the sun shining playfully through the windows. Theo asks the question again, what he thinks. Rudwell looks at him. He looks at Theo and says, considering young Mr. Allen's recent fights, the victory is definitely his. Theo completely agrees with Rudwell. Facilia watches the duel closely. Theo and Rudwell continue their conversation. Rudwell asks if the head has a different opinion on the matter. Theo sees that young Mr. Knox has really changed, but he doesn't believe he will win. Knox looks at his opponent and Theo thinks it would be unfair if Knox wins. Theo has worked his way up to becoming the knight behind the head of the family. The art of wielding a blade can be deceptively mesmerizing. But the bottom line is shockingly simple. No matter how much you practice and no matter how much you hone your skill with a sword, there is only one single lever that can turn everything in your direction and bring the person towering over you to his knees. A wall that cannot be climbed over. It's an unfathomable talent. The butler looks questioningly. He does not know if the young master is gifted with such a talent. The butler looks at Theo and listens, but the possibility is still there. Theo sits watching the fight and continues that the Reinhafer family's blood runs in him, which means there is a chance that the youngest son was born with the talent of a sword emperor. A window pops up and Knox's sword skill is not activated. He indignantly yells, "Your GE." He exhales tiredly and puts his sword down, wondering where he got his karma so bad. He knows he has a high luck score, or it's in the negative column. In the end, he never managed to increase his stamina to 4. Windows pop up with skill activation. Stamina increased by 0.1. It's already sunset in the courtyard. It's already evening and Knox is still running. And in her head, only her stamina stats have increased by 0.1. The maid runs after him and hastily calls out to him. She runs with the last of her strength, already sobbing from exhaustion, asking him if she has to run with him. Knox turns around and replies that absolutely, then it wouldn't be so funny. Saying to turn her head on, who would take care of him if not her? She heard him say something else. He hands her a handkerchief. He has another errand for her. She looks indignantly at him and at the handkerchief. He thinks she's already cursed him 100 times in her mind. She takes the handkerchief and wrinkles her nose at his words, biting her tongue. He laughs at her because she looks so funny. He looks and thinks about it, for she must have pretty good stamina, he wants to see. A window pops up with the maid's characteristics. He's very indignant. He doesn't believe the maid is stronger than the average man. He wonders what's going on with these Reinhafers. He's angry, but she doesn't understand. After all, her stamina numbers she started out with are higher than his, which he's been working for all month. He's offended. She reminds him that it's evening and tomorrow is the duel, and he needs to rest. He looks up at the sky, realizing how quickly the days are flying by. Time is running out. The day of the duel, his brother looks at Knox, suggesting he surrender before it's too late. The twin smugly declares that he is a disgrace to the family and mockingly says that he is his younger brother. He can't fight him at full strength. He replies that it doesn't look like he wants Knox to give up. The brother laughs, agreeing with Knox that he wants to impress the daughter of the Stilliner family, and Knox has to help him. Knox looks away and says he's not sure she's a good choice. He looks at his stats. He has an endurance of 8. Alan laughingly asks if he has his eye on her too. Knox realizes that conventional methods won't win him over. Then something else is needed. The guy says that the duel is an opportunity to enter the academy. They stand across from each other listening to the speech before the duel. Knox von Reinhafer and Alan von Reinhafer, they must accept the results as they will be. No objections will be accepted. Knox is nervous and looks at Alan. If he fails now, it's over. He needs to recover his memories. And find out who sent him that letter. In a year, he'll be dead. Knox grips his sword tighter. They hear the scream. Are they ready? They hear a start and the brother immediately attacks Knox. Knox backs away from the attack. His brother's sword hits the stone floor. Their feet move quickly across the floor. Knox looks at his brother and realizes he might lose. He puts up a defense and pulls back on one knee. Knox looks at him indignantly. Alan mockingly praises him for the block he put up. They have a very strong scramble, the wind from their movements swaying the hall this way and that. Knox resents this concept of playing inner lunatic. He gives him a serious look and continues, because if you lose now, there's no way forward. But if you win, a status window pops up and shows that his stamina is up another 0.1. Knox looks on in surprise. Sweat drops on his face from the duel. He's happy. He needs to win now to be invincible later. Alan looks at him questioningly and says his head has had enough punches. They continue the bout, Alan again mockingly saying he can take a couple more. Knox yells out, Facilia looks at them and laughs, for it was foolish to pay attention to the change in the younger man. Alan hits Nox's sword and he falls. Facilia is sure her son will get into the academy. She mutters that this duel is pathetic. Theo tensely watches his son's duel. Facilia thinks ill thoughts on this family. Theo tells the butler that he liked Nox's changes and has been waiting for this duel, and this is the best he can do. He's thinking of stopping the duel. Nox is already out of breath from the duel. If this continues, he will take a long time to recover. Alan asks Nox if he's out of breath. Alan and Hertz are talented, but not talented enough. In fact, compared to his first son, they're nothing. The ability to keep everything under control, coupled with the incredible power with which he overwhelms his opponent. A dark sword of dominance. Nox is trying to catch his breath, barely holding the sword anymore. Theo doesn't know who to give the sword of dominance to. He gets up from his chair and says to stop the duel. Nox's stamina has increased by another 0.1. Nox stands, with only air from the swords around him. He has activated his sword and martial arts skill. Nox smiles, drops of sweat falling from his face. There are sparks from the fire all around. Alan mockingly asks if he's out of his mind. Nox has activated the Time Lord skill. Theo tensely watches what is happening. There are clock gears all around Nox, and he just stands there tensely. Someone in the audience says he heard somewhere. Alan, with a satisfied face, is about to throw a punch at Nox. Nox looks at Alan. Everyone unique and talented has their time. It's the hour of the unique. Everything is slowed down, a skill that allows him to slow down everything in his sight. Nox holds the sword, the enemy's movement is now slower, and he in turn can move the same way. So it will be a bit difficult to get the most out of this bonus. But since the sword and martial arts skill is activated, Nox raises his sword upwards. It's already a foregone conclusion. He makes a strike and Alan and his sword start to fall. Alan looks at Nox incomprehensibly. Alan's sword flies off. Nox stands up and says he is the winner of this duel. Alan's sword flies to the floor with a clatter. Alan looks at Nox with anger, holding his hand. Nox holds the sword in his hand like he's about to do something else. He looks pitifully at Alan and says he's having fun. Alan looks angrily at Nox, who asks what. Nox looks at him and says you can't do it anyway. The time bonus only lasts 5 minutes, and no matter how, you have to make it in time. Nox looks at him and says he hasn't fought him at full strength before. Nox tells his older brothers that this is boring. He suggests that they end it all, and soon, he tells them to attack him with the two of them. The brothers look at him incomprehensively. Nox turns to his father, asking for a fight with two brothers at once. His father looks at Nox in surprise. He didn't expect this. The butler looks at Theo and waits to see what he has to say. Talia anxiously asks what he's doing. Theo looks at his son with a smile. He feels his energy has changed. He realizes he has an ace up his sleeve, decides to wait to stop the duel, and authorizes a 2-on-1 duel. Then an outraged Facilia jumps up. They're facing each other. Nox is ready to fight. Alan reaches for his sword with an angry grimace. Alan doesn't understand how Nox could humiliate them in front of his father. Nox looks at them calmly, even smiling. The brothers yell at Nox to get ready. They double-team him, one jumping, the other running. The impact of the swords is very loud. Nox manages to fend them off with great skill and professionalism. Alan shouts to his brother to approach him from the left. The other one answers him and runs at Nox. Nox waits seriously. Lightning flashes around him. A window pops up. Nox's level in the game increases. He is pleased that his sword skill is increasing. Now he can see the sword. One strikes, Nox reflects, the other prepares but screams, damn. They are in pain after his blows. Nox walks quickly past, hitting him with his shoulder. They spread apart, trying to catch their breath. Talia indignantly yells Nox's name. Nox looks at the brothers with a smirk, just like Alan looked at him at the beginning of their fight. The brothers with fear and incomprehension as only Nox, the disgrace of the family, has suddenly changed so much. The brothers look at each other as if regretting what happened. One quietly says something he said before. The brothers start fighting and Nox quietly goes at one of them. Alan yells at his brother to stay focused during the fight. Nox walks past the brothers waving his sword near them. They are outraged. Nox suddenly attacks the brothers. One of them manages to defend himself and almost falls. Nox is pointing in someone's direction. After all, the well-being of the game is at stake. He looks at his brothers and he just likes to sword fight. Nox takes a swing, streaks of air around him. He's having fun. Talia is surprised by what is happening and terrified at the same time. Theo doesn't understand what is happening to his son. Alan screams that this can't happen, it's impossible. The other brother falls from such a strong blow from Nox. Both brothers are lying on the floor with shortness of breath. They are terrified. A window pops up that the action is over. Nox looks at everyone with disappointment, that's all. He looks at his brothers with disappointment. Facilia jumps up from her chair and yells at Hartz and Alan. Nox rudely asks if a winner has already been chosen. He is answered with fear and questioning, of course. Nox is declared the winner of the duel. Nox anxiously says no, no, no. He gets scared. Nox's sword starts to fall out of his hand. The sword falls to the stone floor, and with a loud thud, Theo stands and with a serious face looks at everything that is happening. Nox looks at his father with a smile. He bows and announces that he's leaving. Nox turns around and proudly walks towards the exit of the training room. Talia watches indignantly as Nox walks away. He walks to the exit and stands up. Talia urgently wants to talk to Nox. It's already sunset outside. A lot of time they spent out there. He looks at the sunset walking out of the training room. Walking out, he tries to catch his breath from the hard duel. Surprised, he looks somewhere, not realizing what is going on. Why the blood? Looking at his hand, which is covered in blood, he realizes that he has been using the skill for a long time. Bonus skill Time Lord has one big disadvantage. He got a debuff of recoil. It happens when you exceed the limit of use of the skill. For exceeding the time limit, his life was shortened by 2 days and 17 hours. Looking at his hand, he thinks that the worst debuff, because to return the time of life that he took off, it is impossible, and his immunity because of it also suffered, and he is already terminally ill. But it's a good thing he didn't get the kickback in front of everyone. If anyone had seen it, he'd have lost his entrance to the academy, and he'd have worked so hard for it. He turns his head to the side and sees there. He doesn't like it. Waste walks indignantly towards him, asking if he's hurt. She approaches, asks immediately, was he wounded during the fight? He gets angry at this situation and looks at her angrily. Talia walks up to him. He looks questioningly. He realizes that she has noticed. He wondered why she was the one out of all of them, but he can't let Theo know about the payoff. He starts to get rough. She says, how could such a wimp win a fight against 2 men? He angrily asks, what? She blushed and started to justify herself by saying, I think, and paused. She felt embarrassed by her words, and after a pause continued that he misunderstood her. A month ago, she had seen Nox never once holding a sword in his hands. That day, he had only clumsily waved a wooden sword. He had no chance of winning. It's all about natural talent. Talia must learn how he awakened it and how he developed it. But after the fight was over, when he was left alone, he looked broken. She doesn't understand what's going on or why he's in such a state. After all, he just defeated his brothers, with his talent and uniqueness. She looks at Nox and sees a hopeless loser, as the others assured her. But in fact, he's working his ass off to win. She looks at him with regret. She looks at him. He coughs lightly into his hand. She asks him if he's okay and reaches out to him. He abruptly pushes her hand away with his arm with indignation. He angrily tells her to remove her hands. He takes his head in horror and confesses that for the past 2 years, he has been literally wallowing in his gambling addiction. So it's hard for him to socialize with people. He's very thoughtful since she's his killer yet. She folds her arms in front of her chest, the beginning and pauses. Talia, embarrassed, says sorry and nothing more. Nox is surprised by her apology. He didn't expect that from her. She didn't know he was so serious about wielding a sword. She says he was born a weak child. She realized why he only trained in endurance. She apologizes for behaving reprehensibly. She says that the role of the loser has grown tiresome to him. Though he is different, she speaks the words of her maid, that anyone can make mistakes and jump to conclusions. Talia says, embarrassed. Nox is embarrassed, not knowing what to say back to her now. She's always honest, he noticed when he was playing the game. Despite having the skills of a knight and being the daughter of a noble family, it's no wonder she has a hard time admitting she's wrong. Talia stands in armor with a sword and a serious face. He sadly tells her that if she really thinks so, then she should not tell anyone about the blood. Talia shouts indignantly and exclaims, no way. Nox looks at her and realizes that he doesn't have to worry about anyone finding out what happened. Nox leaves to the mansion and yells to Talia to keep her word. She looks after him. Talia looks after him disappointed. She is very sad. It is night. There are a couple of clouds in the sky, but the lights are on in the mansion. Theo sits thinking about it as his hunch is confirmed. Theo talks to the butler. He asks him if he thinks Nox is really talented. The butler replies that he can't understand why he gave in at the beginning. Among young men his age, including all the young gentlemen, he is the best. Theo agrees with the butler, but he doesn't understand why either. But, holding a pause, he's sure that there is more talent hidden in him that they are yet to see. Theo asks him to watch his every move, to do nothing but always be there for him. The butler agrees. Theo raised his hand to the pendant, wondering if he had enough, and paused at that. He looked at his hand and continued, the talent to inherit the merciless blade of darkness. He looks anxiously at the butler and says there is no time. He goes on to say that the butler has been assigned a case of incredible complexity. From the window, you can see the butler bowing, saying that he will not let him down. There are a couple of clouds in the sky and stars are visible. The light is still on in someone's window. Someone is still awake and probably not going to yet. Knox pops up a status window and completes a class assignment and an achievement. Knox sits in his room. The world has become a reality to him, but the game system hasn't gone anywhere, and neither have the status windows. A window pops up in front of him to receive an award, followed by a window for getting stats. That's the jackpot. He resents the fact that he plowed for a month to increase his stamina by 2 points, and he should have started with those stats. A bunch of windows fly around him with stats to raise. Status windows. He looks at the status window and looks for stamina. He sees that his luck is at 10 and is very happy. He stands there happy with his achievements. This is all so that he doesn't have to work so hard later. Luck in Inner Lunatic is one of the most useful and necessary indicators. He looks away, contemplating testing his luck in the case. A status window pops up with a disarm bonus. Another window pops up with a few more bonuses received. He looks at the windows and is glad there is a bonus system. Looks carefully and decides to use the twist. A vending machine with some balls appears. It glows red and blue. He looks at it all. Knox laughs at how weird it all looks in person. Knox decides to give it a try and spins the little key. He knows that with maxed out luck, the chances of knocking out a medium rank and above is about 96%, but he's not too sure about that. The thing starts to glow even more, but in different colors already. He remembers that normal rank and below are white, medium rank is silver, but high rank is gold. He is tense because the highest rank is multicolored. He asks for gold or higher to fall out. It's shining more and more. The red button is burning brightly, and then it opens and a golden light shines from it. Knox looks up, his face lighting up with gold. Knox, with the golden scroll in his hands, shouts that he has succeeded. Knox carefully opens the golden scroll. Immediately, windows pop up with rank determination, congratulations, and getting a high rank. Knox joyfully shouts victory with scroll in hand. Again pops up with skill information and active skills. Knox shouts in, but he is very happy with what is happening, cheeks flushed. He looks away with a satisfied face. After all, he got the worst debuff today, yet the reward is nothing too. He looks out the window and realizes what skill will fall to him. It will be one of the secrets of the Reinhofer family. Pausing for a moment, he will need this skill to obtain it. After all, Theo will soon gather all the brothers to the estate. That's when Knox will use this skill. A window pops up, prompting him to use a one-time voucher. Knox suddenly remembers that he must return to the Reinhofer estate. There was recently a graduation ceremony from the Eldane Academy. Grain von Reinhofer, second son of the Reinhofer family, to become a full knight, he had to travel. Knox, having put his hand to his forehead, realizes that he needs to find the secret and deal with Grain as soon as possible. There is no time to sit around. One thing he is happy about. He hopes that he won't have to worry about Talia anymore. Remembering her sad and confused face, he realizes that she will not break her promise. But she has no reason to socialize either. It's night. The mansion is bright outside as there are no clouds. Morning comes. The mansion is already bright with sunlight. Knox is more calm than ever. This is what he thought only in the evening. In the hallway, he sees a serious Talia. Calmly but slightly disgruntled, he asks her if they didn't work things out yesterday and what she needs from him again. She quietly lowers her head and asks for a story and pauses. He looks at her worriedly, asking what to tell. She becomes indignant and asks him to tell her how he suddenly became so strong. Talia asks Knox to tell how he became so strong. Knox just stands there quietly and remains silent, not knowing what to say. He walks over and says that she has been peeking at his workouts all month. She looks surprised at him. Talia is confused and surprised at the same time because she thought he didn't see her. She runs after him and yells for him to wait for her and tell her how he was training. That's when he remembers Talia's sister and how she was always trying to get her to confess. He stops, says you know, and pauses for a moment, continuing on before asking such questions and trying to find out how his training was. He calmly advises her to find her talent. She looks at him in surprise. She clearly didn't expect him to give such advice. Thinking about it, Knox doesn't know what else to say or advise her. He turns around to leave, and the last thing he tells her is to stop comparing herself to others. Talia stands and watches Knox walk away. Talia just stares after him with her mouth open. She is surprised at the words he said. Tears come to Talia's eyes. He just walked away. The weather outside is nice. There is not a single cloud in the sky, and the sun is shining brightly. He walks some distance, wondering if she will even run after him. The servants, brothers, and Theo are gathered near the stables. Knox doesn't want her to know he's out to get the family secret when she has to kill him. Theo stands outside the stables, looking away as if he saw someone. Looking at the stables, someone imagines her. There are several horses grazing in the paddock. She is famous for raising the best horses in the country. The butler bows to the head. Theo wanted to see him. Theo says everyone is assembled. The father looks at the boys and asks if they know what he called them there for. He continues that they are to choose a horse that will serve them for the rest of their lives. Knox breaks out into a smile. He knew this and had been expecting it. A horse, what in the country, what in the Reinhofer family, a holy animal. And if you become a mage or a knight, you choose a horse to be your lifelong companion when you're very young. The academy teaches horseback riding, and later in the game there will be many major wars. If a horse dies, you have to raise a new one from scratch. And moving magic, expensive. Nox is frustrated with the realistic limitations, so horses play an important role. He smiles, for it is his responsibility to choose the best one. His father turns to Nox, the winner of the duel, offering to be the first to choose a horse. The brothers look at Nox with anger. In the background, they hear their father's voice, and what he says, that there is only one try. Nox looks away with a satisfied face and pride. Nox went to the corral with the horses. Theo is curious who he will choose. He watches him with interest. Nox stands in front of the corral, and the one watching the horses bows to him, wondering which horse the younger man will choose. The horses stand and calmly look levelly at Nox. Nox minds the horses, telling them they are nice, but he is looking for a special horse. He chooses carefully. And then he sees the one from afar. He looks at the horse and realizes that this is the one. He walks up to that horse and it walks towards him. He turns around and pretty much says he's picking her. The brothers look at him unhappily and don't understand. His father looks at him angrily. He didn't expect it. He offers him another try for his choice. Nox looks questioningly and doesn't know why another one. The horse shakes and looks at Nox. Nox realized they thought he made a bad choice. Nox stares thoughtfully and a vision comes to him. Windows pops up. It's an obsidian horse. It has darkness as its main element, rank high. The most commonly summoned creatures have ranks. They depend on their age and development. Nox knows that rank can increase by more than one level. It turns out that this horse can reach the highest rank. She's also obsidian, which is the rarest kind of horse there is, named after the fire mountain. Nox looks at his father with disappointment and he looks back at him angrily. But if he knew all this, he would have chosen her himself. Nox smiles, for there are negative characteristics too. Skills, toughness, talented warhorse, bravery. And the negatives, time she has 2 days, 16 hours, and 12 minutes left, to put it in perspective. Nox laughs at the skill. It's worse than his terminal illness. He says he's made his decision and is choosing this particular horse. He reflects with his knowledge he can save and he knows it. Father is angry at Nox, but he doesn't understand why her. He thinks he saw himself in this animal. He decides that nothing has changed, as he was a wimp and a sissy, and still is. His father is disappointed. He says hopefully he won't regret choosing him. He turns around and walks away. Everyone doesn't understand what happened. His brothers shout after him, but he doesn't respond to them. Nox thinks about the fact that his choice didn't please his father. Someone offers him the choice of a horse. Nox goes to the butler, who suggests that Nox choose a name for it. The horse reaches for his hand. Nox wonders what to name it. He turned his attention to the horse. Leaning over to it, he decided to name it Carl. After all, that was the name he chose when he played the Inner Lunatai game. It is very meaningful to him. It is already sunset over the stables. In the mansion, the lights in the windows are still on. Everyone is apparently sitting in their rooms. The horse is lying on the bed covered with a blanket. Nox thinks about it, for he needs to work without being seen, so he settles himself in the room. He looks at the horse carefully and lovingly. It looks at him with those eyes as if it understands everything. Nox looks into the horse's eyes and sees that they are full of desire to live. He remembers himself because he is the same way, trying to survive at all costs. He realizes that she has been fighting for her life longer than he has. He calls out to Rona, knowing she is somewhere nearby, threatening her. She falls down and holds her head, calling back that she's here. He looks at her and says without indignation that she's been caught red-handed, but is followed by the question of why she keeps falling. She wonders how he knew she was around in the first place. He tells her to watch the horse. She's a little indignant that the horse is in the bed. Angrily, she tells him she has to clean up afterwards. He laughs at her and asks her to take care of the horse as he is sick. The horse looks sadly at the maid. Rona agrees with Nox frustratedly. Nox realizes that there is a problem. What he has planned next will shock her. He looks at the horse, and Rona standing next to him. Rona asks the horse that his name is Carl and that he wants to eat. And Nox wonders if she can stand further action. 3 days later, early morning, the sun is still just rising. The maid sits on her knees sobbing, for Carl has died in her arms. He looks at her with pity and sadness and does not understand why she is crying. But at the same time, he understands that she fed him, played with him, brushed him. She put a lot of effort into him. He looks at this picture with sadness, but he knew it would be like this. He looks at it, knowing it can't be saved. He orders her to stop sobbing and asks her to stand up. She says Carl while crying. He calms her down and tells her that he will be back to him soon. She tearfully asks about the blurring. He again orders her to get up now, but smiling. Nox pulls out a scroll from the inside pocket of his jacket. She cautiously asks if it's a scroll. Unrolling the scroll, he places it on the floor and holds it with his hand. Something starts to happen. Some kind of circle glows under the scroll and a pink flame burns nearby. Nox is about to channel mana into the scroll. The maid looks on in horror at everything that is happening. Nox looks at what he is doing with delight. The maid asks indignantly about the use of mana and that it is illegal. Mana control has been bad for him so far and tries again. Nox yells at the maid that if she gets in the way, she will be responsible for his death. He gives her a serious look and tries to concentrate. She's outraged, covers her mouth, wants to say a lot of things to her. He tries again, everything burns pink even more. He never awakened his mana sensitivity skill. Only use mana when you reach the age of 15. Unless, of course, you're a member of the Imperial family. That was why the descendants of the Imperial family were several times more skilled in magic than others. Many entered the academy to learn how to use it. Now he can and pauses, begins to concentrate even harder. He begins to work even harder on his mana. He needs to try to channel as much mana as possible into the scroll. His palms pick up faint streams of energy. He looks at what is happening and is surprised. He realizes that this is the mana. Nox's eyes get crazier and crazier. He laughs. He's curious. He wants to use the voucher for the skill and he has no margin for error. He puts his hand on the scroll one more time after he wants to resort some more. A window pops up with a one-time skill, then he's going to resort to black magic. The book the brush skeleton is holding. A window pops up showing that Carl can be resurrected. Magic pops up over Carl, but it's as if something is missing. A window pops up and suggests using black magic. Nox continues to sit over the scroll surrounded by pink fire. In Inner Lunatic, there are only two kinds of creatures with the undead skill. The first kind, creatures that have been brought back to life by dark magic or dark mana. The second kind, beings who come back to life without ego and are reborn as stronger beings. They will be loyal to their masters no matter what. The trouble is, there's only one family that can raise the dead, a family with a dark past and present, the Mavraz family. But the Reinhoffers are also considered a dark family. But they're a family of knights, death with a book, and the Marwazes are the rulers of dark magic controlling the resurrected. Logically, characters not belonging to the Marwaz family should not be able to use their skills. He denies it. Nox looks on with a smirk. He just needs a one-time voucher for a certain skill helped him, but now he has at his disposal a Necronomist, a book with a brush skeleton in pink fire known as the Book of the Dead. Nox looks at the circle with wonder, and from it come the hands of the dead. And then something incomprehensible happens, as if darkness is consuming everything near the circle. Carla, the hands of the dead begin to embrace. Nox looks at everything with horror. Black blood flows from the corner of his lips. The maid screams at Nox. She's afraid of what is happening now. Nox asks for more silence. He has only a little more to go. She screams. Nox stares in horror at the books in front of him. He looks fearfully at the blood that has spurted from his mouth. You can barely see the pink fire from under his hand. His mana is running low. He's surprised at what is happening. Suddenly, Carl comes to life and stands on his haunches. Carl's eyes start to roar. His eyes are unusual, but white and glowing blue. Nox looks at all of this. He has activated the skill. The pet stands on its hind hooves and looks at him. The pet is resurrected. The Carl's eyes are glistening as if they were undead. Nox is happy that he did it after all. The maid in tears turns to Nox. Nox tries to catch his breath. He spent a lot. She doesn't understand what happened. Nox stands hesitantly in the room. He calls for his horse. Rona looks at Nox in horror. The horse with the blue mane goes to Nox and as if bowing. Skill and basic information windows pop up. The next window is negative. Predestined death removed. Nox enthusiastically shouts victory. He puts his hand on the horse and tells him that he is his master from now on. Carl looks at him like he wants to say something. Nox starts to speak and then stops, looking at him in surprise. Just then, Rona pounces on him and Carl hugs him. Nox says her name, asking what she's letting on. Rona doesn't let them out of the hug, sobbing very hard. She explains sobbing that she was afraid of getting hurt with Nox, and asks how it's possible to use mana so much. Carl snorts at her. Apparently he doesn't like something. Rona cries out questioningly, since she cared for him so much. She orders Carl to spit out all the carrots and he snorts back. Nox looks at them with mock amusement. Nox adjusts his jacket, says okay, and pauses. Next is the secret of the family. It's night, it's light outside with lights on in a few windows. A few days later, Nox walks down the stairs near the burning windows. Carl snorts questioningly at the stables. Nox heads quietly toward Carl in the stable. It's night because of the leaves. You can barely see the moon, but you can see that the sky is clear. A black-gloved hand holds a stone that glows. The other gloved hand is holding some kind of paper that looks like a map. Nox in his cloak shines the stone on the paper, realizing that it's almost no different than the one in the game. Knox stares at the map, nonchalantly examining it. Folding up the map and putting it in his bag, he got lucky. He walks and ponders the second mystery of the Reinhofer family. The ring in the purple flame. He must get it at all costs. It will help offset a little of the debuffs from the incurable disease. He turns around warily as if something has startled him. Taking up his sword, Knox looks into the bushes. He's waiting for something. He continues to watch, suspecting he's being overly sensitive. On the path, he sees some sign very strange. This is no longer a game, but a full-blown reality.